might just, I suppose I can crack on with a little bit of housekeeping and introductions, the less important parts.
Don't be silly, it's all important.
Yeah. Everyone who's out there listening, you're very welcome here to this webinar, collaboration with BIM. I'm joined here by Michael Johnson, who is going to be the main event. Very knowledgeable man. I've had a quick look through the slides and it's all very interesting stuff. Not to be bigging you up too much, Michael.
No pressure then, thanks for that.
Just a few bits of housekeeping. If anyone has any questions, we're more than happy to take them. If you can pop them in the chat, we'll have a short, maybe 5 minutes at the end, run through some of the more pertinent ones. Amazing. We are also recording this event, and everything, maybe apart from the questions, will be made available to everyone who signs up, all attendees. You can share it out as much as you like, of course. And the final thing, Michael might go into it in a bit more detail, but we have another webinar coming up in 2 weeks with one of Michael's colleagues, and everyone will get a link in their email, similar to how you did for this, about how to sign up for that. And that will cover perhaps more the technical aspects of BIM, the software needed, all of that good stuff. A very quick introduction to ourselves. I represent the Industry 4.0 SkillNet. We're a government-funded organization, and we're putting on these webinars to launch our new range of Autodesk courses in collaboration with Cadline, who Michael himself works for. So we offer a discount on a grant funding even for companies who want to send their employees on the range of trainings across the whole Autodesk suite. And Cadline are phenomenal company, well-renowned, platinum level partners, isn't it, Michael?
Yes, it is very much so, platinum level partners.
Yeah. So top-notch training at a bargain rate.
Thank you.
Yes, and Industry 4.0 SkillNet is is a part of FutureCast, and we are technology for the quarrying and construction industry. And without further ado, Michael, please.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'm going to share my screen. If someone can nod, if that's visible, then that will be great. Can we see that?
Looks good. Yep, absolutely.
Great. Okay, I shall just turn that on. Turn that on. Grand. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending, and thank you very much for that amazing big up. I don't really have much to follow after that, I think, so bear with me. My name is Michael Johnson. I'm the head of digital construction and building operations here at Cadline, and I'll explain who we are in a minute. I'm being invited along today to talk about really what this digital agenda might look like. So roughly speaking, we're going to talk about some introductions, a little bit of history, have a look at some of the risks involved in our business, the building information modeling, digital transformation, the term, trends that might be driving that. And why now? What's in it for me? Because I think a lot of you are either fully engaged or put toe in the water, have been looking around in the past and decided for and against. Digital is not just about design. Digital strategies, the importance of having one, and the training, the software, and the following sessions. So a little bit about Cadline, maybe a little bit about me. So I keep saying 35 years, but I think sadly it's now near 40 years in the AEC industry. I started life within architecture. I went and studied architecture, and I think I was one of the first students to pin up drawings that were produced in a CAD format in the very early 80s. I think I was also the first student to be told to take them down because it was an unfair advantage and it'll never catch on anyway. So if my tutors were still around, which sadly I suspect they're not, I'd like to be able to go back and talk to them. Cadline, as we mentioned, we are a platinum partner. We're also an elite construction partner of Autodesk, and we've been doing this for in excess of 25 years. We're now part of a group which manages over 40,000 subscriptions in the UK, but it's probably nearer 400,000 globally. And we're part of a global partnership, and that gives us, we'd like to think, an extended reach, both in terms of our geographies, but our access to capable staff to support you on your journey. A little bit of a history lesson. Where have we come from? I always like to go back to almost ground zero here. We've always had visionary clients and great concepts, fantastic engineering, and these projects have been delivered. But historically, they've always been quite labour intensive. They've been quite dangerous in terms of the working environments, and in some cases, high risk, cost challenge, and supply chain challenges have always been there in the back of everybody's minds. Now, we can't use the numbers of staff and unpaid staff as we used to, but if we look at what we're doing today and what we're delivering, the architecture has changed up, or the engineering has changed, the plumbing's better, but really, even though we've still got visionary clients, etc., we've still got a very labour-intensive, dangerous working environment. And it's a great cost challenge, ever more so, with ever increasingly complex supply chain challenges. And I think that has a number of recognised issues around it. And just looking at technology, an awful lot of us are using multiple applications to produce drawings, to produce words. The lines, arcs and circles and numbers are being produced in a multiplicity of different ways. And there are some issues around that. It's quite often talked about how design and construction teams struggle to find stuff. Where did it go and how do we share it with the right people? And that's a collaboration piece, which we'll come on to later. But I think it's fair to say that an awful lot of what we create in the design and construction space is lost when we go to hand it over. And for those of you out there who are managing assets or procuring design and construction teams, I think it's a high focus on most businesses these days to try and ensure that data is handed over in a manner that can be used in operation. And if we come back and we look at our individual offices, how much of our time around our workforce is not necessarily as productive as it could be whilst we're dealing with mistakes on drawings, understanding conflicts, and generally looking around for information that we maybe should have at our fingertips. I can remember hunting through filing cabinets in my youth, but I think it's changed somewhat. And it's changed because the world we live in today has evolved, and it's changed to, I think it's fair to say, we're now all living and we're very much immersed in a digital age. So that starts to throw a few questions up. And the primary question is probably, as a business or as individuals, are we analog? Or actually, are we now digital? Are we making the most of connected information that's working across our project teams? We know that our projects are full of risk, and that's probably top and center of what we're trying to mitigate. And we're trying to risk the risk of putting something in the wrong place, maybe, or it being the wrong thing. We've got an ever shortening of appropriate skilled staff, be they in the office or out on site. And we have more and more standards to adhere to. And I'm thinking of, in the UK, we've got changes to Part L coming out in June. And what's that going to mean for us? Is that a golden thread of information? We've heard all the buzzwords, but it does come down to quality. It comes down to minimizing the waste. Everybody's well sure. If we get that wrong, then that impacts upon time, on project delivery, whether that's in the design world or construction. We can have poor quality of information as much as we can have poor quality of constructed product. And that then obviously leads to site safety issues when maybe things aren't going according to plan or haven't been designed out. So again, coming back to the golden thread piece, that responsible party for ensuring that something is designed correctly, that will be fit for purpose and will be safe to install. And if we get that wrong, it's going to cost us money. It's also going to cost us a loss of reputation and trust. We can somehow claw back some of the others, but a loss of reputation and a loss of trust tends to hit us right where we don't need it, in the middle of our reputation bubble. So the question I pose really is, could adopting a digital workflow de-risk areas of your project delivery? And to do that, can we also associate that with, can we change the way we work? Do we have to change we have to carry on as we are? But I think most of us will recognize this curve. It's all to do with how difficult it is to change cost or to impact cost the further we go away from the beginning of a project. And actually, the more we build, the harder it is to change anything anyway. So a lot of decisions tend to be made historically in this middle bubble around that RIBA stage of work, where it's just about possible to change things and the cost is not too extensive. But what if we had a paradigm shift and we started to engage with our partners and our co-team members earlier to identify things that might not be right? We can make those changes in a digital world where we can possibly make more of them and at actually a lesser cost to the project and our customers. And what also, if we could start to build data that's usable not just for the CapEx period through that design and construction space, but it's fit for OpEx as well. How many people out there are being handed over buildings that maybe not always has the data associated to manage them successfully for its life cycle? And pretty much every time we go through one of these stages of design, from feasibility to design to construction into the as-built space, there are a multiplicity of tools and people involved that sometimes mean the data gets lost and we start again. So I think we're driving towards this constant curve of whole life cycle information. So that might lead me back to the value of the drawing board. The majority of us on this call probably have some examples of either working in a 2D world, analog on a drawing board, or even in a CAD world, where we've seen the improvements of being able to speed up the process of putting ink on paper, and to define layers, to define blocks, and generally to bring some intelligence to the world of design. But that said, lines, arcs, and circles really only represent things. I could draw rhubarbs on here, and they could actually be represented by columns. So it's not totally without its failings. It's speeded process up and made things better, but we still have the opportunity to have a plan, a section, an elevation, and a schedule, all reading slightly different things. So there is, as we all know, a lot of time and effort spent ensuring that we in our individual offices are coordinating the output before we even start to think about others who might be coordinating on a project with us. So the question around building information modeling or model-based delivery might be, is there a value in driving the same outputs, plans, sections, elevations, and schedules out of a coordinated model, out of a change engine, where we can actually share and annotate information relating to this project, albeit we can still get it wrong, but what's reflected in the model will be reflected in the sheets that are then issued out into that project team. Also means we can put in one place for maybe the first time different disciplines, so architecture, structural, MEP, other engineering, consulting inputs into one model for a coordinated set of information. So building information modeling probably means a million things to different people, but my term is very much around, it's the creation and management of long life, multi-purpose, connected these days, data. And it starts life at that site acquisition point. I think I drew this diagram a long, long time ago in an airport, but it sort of works for me how we as an organization are involved in a project from the point where the site is acquired for something to go on it. And we put together a project assembly and planning team, whether we're the customer, whether we're the designer. We design something, and we do that in collaboration with many others, be they engineers or otherwise. And we procure services to enable us to start constructing something, and that thing is then sold, used, leased, managed. It goes through that facilities management space, and in many cases, it's refurbished or deconstructed. But what that really means is there's an awful lot of information being produced in a very, very positive and solid way by lots of different players around the inside of that ring. And those are just a few, for example. The challenge we have is that they tend to be, or have historically been, siloed in terms of the data, the content, form, the shape, how usable it is by the next person around that ring. And ultimately, is that the best way to work? So what does that really mean when it comes to producing models? Wouldn't it be good if we can actually produce a coordinated set of information, which in an ideal world might even be in 3D, so we can visualize the sort of images there on the screen. We can design, we can visualize, we can see and share, we can simulate, we can change, we can optioneer, and we can analyze for the best fit and the best performance for our customer. And then we can document it, and we can document it in such a way that it's standardized. It can be shared by everybody, it can be read by everybody. We can then deliver and manage that process in a structured and organized way. In more and more cases over the last 2 years, we've had to do that remotely. So the importance of having a standard structure is ever more important, as I'm sure you've all experienced. In my mind, there are some evolving aims around this building information modeling or digital world. I think it was fair to say it could have been seen primarily for increasing efficiencies and productivity, and you would have heard people probably like me telling you how much better, faster, quicker we can do things. But I think we've moved past that now, and I think we've moved past these silos of information. We recognize that good stuff is created in each space, but not necessarily connected. But I think we're looking at the wider goals now, and I think we're looking not just at that quadrant there of produced information. I think we're also looking to see what are the value changes in human and societal environmental areas that we can bring to the table. How can digitalization, how can BIM impact maybe on some of the more global challenges of carbon emissions, sustainability, building back better? We've heard many, many statements, but I think there's an element of truth to say that better information can better inform, and it can go past that handover period and work into smart cities, etc., etc. Probably fair to say that there are a number of trends that have been driving transformation for some time now, whether that was off-site construction, as we find that modularization is a far better way in some sectors for building. The productivity and the skills scarcity is forcing us down a route of looking at building things in a slightly different way, which then will probably work backwards, and we start to look at designing things in a different way. And finally, the investment, I think, in technology has changed from being somewhere behind fishing in the North Sea. We're now investing more and more money into how we design, build, and operate in our built environment. And we've had collaborative project teams for a long time, but there are mandates, there are directions from various governments, from various customer types, and from various clients that we're working with that are looking to streamline these processes and help ensure them get data that they feel they can use better throughout the OPEX period of that program. So it's sort of, why would and why are owner-operators, asset owners engaging? I mean, I think it's fair to say better, safer, faster, but there are some definite pullouts there, whether it's ensuring greater transparency in that design and build process so they can understand in more depth what they're paying for at an earlier stage. Maybe they weren't so good at interpreting two-dimensional drawings, maybe three-dimensional drawings give them a better understanding of what their asset might look like, give them the opportunity to question that. Is it to do with retaining the value that they're investing into in that construction process to enable them to transition from build to manage? Is it to do with ensuring that they are managing their own project data? And I think more and more we're seeing customers looking to understand where cost movement happens and time movement happens. And as a result, I think the standards being asked for and the process and deliveries are pushing down this route. I think from a design point of view, that's my background, we've got far better design coordination aspects. I can better understand the decisions I'm making in designs, and I can communicate them too. And I come back to that point because those who are involved in design probably have a certain mindset. Those that are procuring design have a different mindset. They have a building need, they have a commercial mind. It is two-dimensional information the best way forward. So can we share information and better communicate it? And can we document it with less errors? Can we identify some of these design issues before they become too expensive? And probably most importantly, can we ensure that the extra analysis that we can perform earlier enables us to deliver the best asset on behalf of our customers? And I suppose buried at the bottom there, in everybody's bucket of win, is increased profits because we're being hopefully more efficient. In the contracting space, I think the money here is the risk is definitely here when we start putting spades in the ground. That's where the issues occur. So very much safer, quicker and leaner, but with a focus around better understanding cost at an earlier stage. It's got to be a lot easier to pull coordinated information from a model than it might be to try and assess information from a 2D design that's open to interpretation in some cases. I can then start to look at where things might work and where they might not. I can look at my safety planning and I can start to reduce waste. We looked at waste earlier, but in this case, it's probably man hours and materials. And maybe it's a case of how much of this can I assemble rather than construct? Is there a way of looking at standardization, whether that's components or assemblies of components? Can I pre-assemble stuff and then modularize this and hand it over earlier to our customers? There's a lot of things to think about now. And all of that really is beginning now to show powerful results. The metrics are being captured. We'd all like to think there's data, lies and data, but I think those that have been involved will begin to realize that they are more productive. There are savings to be made in both the design world and the construction world, and coordination in particular. I can remember sitting down with piles of drawings and a yellow pen, trying to make sense of things. So there are definitely gains in that three-dimensional collaboration world of BIM. But you've seen all this before. I probably haven't told anybody an awful lot that they weren't already aware of. It's whether it's government strategies, building information modeling, BIM managers, PASs. I'm a bit sort of fed up with it. It's BIM wash. So really, why now? Why me? And why not leave it to others? Which is an argument that I do hear quite a lot. People suggesting that my projects aren't big enough, my customers don't want it, I'm not ready for it, we're very effective as we are. But there are reasons, and I think the primary reason is that you can now be in control. We have a set of tools, which unashamedly, I'm going to mention the word Autodesk, that manages the design world through planning, through into construction and out into operate. And you can actually manage that now in one place. So Autodesk have spent a fair bit of time understanding that the world doesn't stop at drawing boards at CAD. It doesn't stop at CAD to Revit. What does that information actually go towards? Well, it goes towards the work that we all do in planning, building and operating assets. So we finally have a set of connected tools, which I think when James joins you in the next session, he'll be able to highlight the benefits of this workflow. But cutting down to the quick, digital BIM modeling is going to support our industry values. And I'm sure most of you are looking at risk, time, cost, safety, and carbon. There's a multiplicity of others, but if we address just those alone, I think we might be in quite an interesting space. So don't forget that building information modeling is just not about design. There's some great benefits in design, but there are also some great benefits in that construction space. And I know that there are people on the call that have been involved in this process for quite some time now. They use the design data to visualize how they might win the project, how they might deliver that project. So at tender stage, what can they do to show their understanding of the construction process, whether it's construction sequencing, whether it's getting the price right, getting quantities out of the model, or whether it's actually better understanding those coordinated reviews and identifying where things in design might go bump and how those can be ironed out before they get to site. The pre-construction clash detection and management, it might seem obvious, but if we can identify where things aren't working quite as well as they should do, and we can report on that and we can share that information with the parties responsible for ironing the problems out, think about the costs involved, both time, materials in those RFIs and those snagging reports. If we can get the cost right, or we can get the costs sharper at that pre-construction stage, where maybe we haven't actually been appointed yet, we're still tendering. If we can create bills of quantities, if we can look at the power of design data and how we can bring that into an estimating workflow, then I think you might agree that we can save time, even if, as I've said to a few people in the past, if I can show you how to lose work more efficiently, the cost of tendering will be reduced, and that should go onto your bottom line at the end of the year. Visualization, aids planning, winning work. Wouldn't it be great to see how we go from a hole in the ground to a finished building and be able to play that back week by week, month by month to ensure not only will we be able to deliver on time, but if it impacts on any other activities in that locale. And I think this might have been an example of where a building was seen to have been in the wrong place at the wrong time with regards to the Olympic Games. And the customer was able to prove that the impact on the environment wasn't going to be as great as it was first thought. So the project went ahead on time and therefore had a return on investment as was expected. So once we get out onto site, what's the value of all that hard work and effort that's gone into producing information if we can't get it to the job site at the right time? Again, I'm sure we've all been on sites, whether it's small or large, where somebody might not be working to the latest revision of a drawing, and how do they go about getting that? So putting the right information into the right hands of the right people, I think, is super important. And the review process, looking at information on an iPad, on a tablet, on an Android machine, and being able to take that backwards and forwards out of the office into the site. Let's not forget, we don't build things in offices. And I think it would be fair to say that I and others over many years have focused on getting it right in design and producing these beautiful collaborated and federated models where actually if something's misplaced on site, everything else tends to follow along behind with a bit of a bump. So improve site information. And what impact has digitalization had on offsite manufacturing? Call it modular, call it Dfma. I think it's quite a lot. I think one of the challenges historically was not being able to be confident that past constructions were where they should be, of the size they should. So could we design offsite and bring these things into the construction environment knowing they would fit? I think it's fair to say that we've come on leaps and bounds. And the next exciting piece in my mind of digitalization is possibly this accident that's happening between construction and manufacturing. How can we bleed the design information into that manufacturing space? And it's a challenge for us as software facing businesses to be able to enable a design team to create information that's fit for fabrication. Now, obviously the levels of detail and information change quite a lot as we go through there. And as an industry, I think we're looking very hard at whether the original information starts in the design of the fabricated component or the assemblies and is utilized in design, or vice versa. But I'm very happy to take that offline with anybody, as it's a personal point of interest. Where is the best place to create these libraries, components? And when we started to do all this great work, who and how is responsible for ensuring QA and safety and snagging and supply chain management? I mentioned right at the beginning that supply chains are becoming ever more complicated. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that the contracts are as well. So how do we overcome this, what might be seen historically, culture of blame, and have a transparent culture of share? And I think one of the ways we can do that is by utilizing technology on site, which comes back to, again, making maximum use of that design information that was produced such a long, long time ago. And once we built something, did we build it in the right place? So what part can digitalization have to play in the world of construction verification? Did we put it where we said we would? Is it important that it is or isn't in the right place? And will that have a knock-on effect on the constructability of other assets that are going into this building? How quickly and easily, and I think fortunately quickly and easy is changing rapidly. We now have some very good tools to enable us to capture point cloud data and federate that inside some of the models. If it was as easy as that, everyone would be doing it, but it definitely is a step in the right direction. And I see this being used more and more. We as a business do it at Cadline. We have an engineering services team that carry out this functionality on behalf of customers on a regular basis. As I mentioned at the beginning, how important is it to hand over better information that's fit for use in FM? It is a challenge, I understand that, because quite often we don't have visibility of the people who will be managing that asset. It's not necessarily the owner, it is more than often outsourced. Outsourced FM companies are extremely good at what they do, and they have their preferred tool sets. But there is a minimum amount of information that would make their life easier. And if we put the right structure into place, I think we can actually start to assist at that very expensive end of the life cycle. Mitigating risks, in my mind, it is all about mitigating risk, whether it's design and build risks, whether it's to do with avoiding the cost of rework, whether it's to do with increasing safety or not being able to increase safety. So we have that massive piece of PI cost that's sitting in there. Can we also increase our revenue with new services? So whether we're designers or contractors, what can we offer now through a digital workflow that we might not have been able to before? And now in my world of architecture, it's been very constrained about what an architectural delivery looks like, but there's an awful lot more that we can do and people are beginning to do as roles and responsibilities change through the adoption of technology. So a lot of this starts us on our route towards the infamous digital twin, whether that's digital twin and smart cities and Industry 4.0, or whether actually that's a digital twin. And we're starting to look at a representation of what will finally be running. And if that includes the Internet of Things and smart use of reporting procedures, is that going to put us in a better world? And I think very much it is. I think if you look at the work that Schneider do with smart buildings and the various government incentives to look at gluing buildings into the environment, into cities and into countries, then this massive information is going to start probably in our hands at the design. So what next? Do we need to define and train and look at technology? Do we need to look at process and people and technology? And I'm sure a lot of you have already. So what shape does information need to be in at what point? What information are we trying to manage and has that changed over time? And the people, are we moving people from role to role? Do existing roles mirror those historically? We obviously know, we've seen and we've heard and we employ different people doing different things, whether they're digital engineers, whether they're BIM managers, the terminology goes on, but is digital fundamentally changing some of the roles and responsibilities that some of you have? And what part really does technology play in that? I think it's a lot. The technology is improving and really focuses on what we have to do and how we deliver our daily responsibilities. I'm not sure that could have been true a while ago, but it definitely does now. And then process. How important is process? And James will talk about the importance of a digital strategy. And I'm a great believer in a digital strategy being based around something which might be recognized. Many of you will have come across ISO 19650, which replaced the old PAS, which gives us a very clear indication as to what our responsibilities are in this digital world. So if we're going to strive to become digital, we have to put structure into place. To me, it makes an awful lot of sense that that structure, whether we actually become accredited or not, is not so relevant, but we put our structure around something which is internationally recognized, because the benefits there really start to streamline what that investment looks like. There will be people who will say, this is expensive. Do I need to do it? How much will it cost? How do I actually get my money back? What's the return on investment? But actually having a structure gives you some very clear stage gates, I think, to enable you to monitor success against cost. And it'll definitely differentiate you as a business from others in the marketplace, even if you're not being asked to adhere to the ISO. Don't forget people. People's why we're here today, probably why Industry 4 is here, to enable you to have access to industry best practice training. So without the structure, we probably don't know what the technology needs to look like. When we know what the technology needs to look like, we probably need to ensure that we're giving the staff, our most important asset, our most expensive asset, the right skills to use the technology. The technology we'd like to think in the majority of the world comes from Autodesk in design. It actually does in most environments, and ever more so in construction as well. So that's what James will be talking about in a couple of weeks' time. So we hopefully you'll register with as you have today for this session to listen to James. James is one of our senior AEC service managers. he is very much picks and clicks and functionality. I'm smoke and mirrors and noise. So you'll hopefully learn an awful lot from listening to James. Don't forget that success really starts here. It starts with this association with Industry for Futurecast. There is access, I'm led to believe, from funds. And if funds are available at a discounted price, then my advice would be, if appropriate, take those training courses in alignment with the other services that we can all collectively support you with. So that's my ramblings. Hopefully that's touched on a few things that you hadn't heard of. I'm sure in most cases it's just reminded you of what you already knew. The Industry 4 guys are here, the connections are there, the contacts are there. Feel free to contact myself. Headline are very, very keen to be involved in this. We've been operating globally for a long time, Ireland for a long time as being part of that environment. And I'm very proud to be working alongside the guys here at Futurecast. So that's my spiel for the afternoon. I hope that had some value, and thank you very much for attending.
That was excellent, Michael. Thank you so much for all that. Fantastic. And one final piece of housekeeping, everyone. I popped into the chat there just a feedback form. Really appreciate it if everyone can just put in your thoughts, anything. I won't tell Michael any of the mean things you say about him, but
I've heard them all before.
There you go. Thick skin.
Absolutely.
If anyone has any questions there, we'd love to hear them. I know, Michael, there was one about implementing IoT in BIM. I don't know if that's something in your wheelhouse, or would that be best for?
I'm definitely happy to offer my opinions. I think it's an integral part, and we've been talking about building information modeling, digitalization, the many terms that are used out there, but it's all about information. It's about creating structured information at the right thing. My experiences in design was we're very, very good at predicting the performance of things. During my lifetime, we haven't been particularly good at going out and capturing that data to report back and have lessons learned around, was that good? Was it as good as we expected it to be? So I think the BMS systems that are floating around in the world now, we do a lot of work with Schneider Electric, have some very, very good tools. And I think the Internet of Things and BIM, without a doubt, are joined at the hips. The challenge is to, I think, work with those that are interested to try and glue those pieces of information together. But most of the technology platforms that are involved in digitalization these days have some form of connectivity, interoperability. In the world of Autodesk, it sits on Forge. Forge is an open API, which is enabling people to connect on an ever more regular basis. So if anyone wants to look at anything specific around the Internet of Things, then just drop me a line and we can look at that in more detail.
Fantastic. Something I actually didn't even think about in BIM was anything about IoT. That's my first time hearing about it now.
Well, I think it's a very connected world, isn't it?
We have another one here from Sean. What do we think about so many companies have BIM but don't use it in all their projects?
Yep, I think that's a really good question. I think it depends on what the company is. So if I was to make an assumption and say design, are we saying that there are companies out there that have a modeling capability but don't choose to model on all projects? And I think that's maybe a maturity piece, maybe it's a skill piece, maybe it's an understanding of the timescales involved. I think there's a lot of history around it's expensive. My customers don't ask for it. And I think I can do a quicker, faster version traditionally. I suspect in many cases that's true. I think it's when you start to look back at how many times have I changed it? Do I have to take that design forwards? Am I building a platform for the future of this project? But absolutely, I think it's a very relevant point that it doesn't necessarily fit all in the first instance. My experience is that those that have said, I'll use it on chosen projects, after not too long a period of time, will throw away the 2D versions and pick up the 3D modeling. it's just more efficient. It's efficient, it's minimizing risk. It's also to do, I think, with the availability of staff. As staff are either transitioning from 2D to 3D, or they're transitioning into a business from maybe a university or from a point of learning, they probably come pre-pregged these days with modeling skills, and would therefore possibly be looking to be employed in an environment where modeling was front and center, as opposed to maybe looking at businesses that had a more traditional approach. But there are many arguments, I'm sure.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to raise with you, Michael, as well. I've heard in the UK, BIM is mandatory in government-funded projects. Is that true?
Yes, I think we've had our 2016 mandate. I think it would be fair to say that there are still projects where it might be mandated, but isn't always being driven as strongly as it could be.
Okay.
What I find is that there are more and more main contractors who have been involved in frameworks, who have learnt the benefits and have seen the benefits, and are now in a position where they are driving the lines and driving the rules. I think also there are a number of commercial clients who are seeing the benefits of a more joined up approach. And I mentioned earlier, understanding what a design looks like. These guys are commercial, they're building end users sometimes, or they're clinicians, they're hospitals, they're educationalists. And showing them lots of drawings doesn't always help. Putting them into that space, if we start to use the technologies of AR and VR, immersive technologies, even house builders, let's be honest. I mean, I've been into a number of major house building offices and seen people using VR headsets to put me, the potential house buyer, into this environment, and it's very compelling. Definitely sells it.
Yeah, and I think it seems to be very much a trend here in Ireland now that we seem to be following your lead on. I don't think there's any clear date set for it yet, but it definitely seems to be the trend in our experience here.
We definitely have some very large customers operating in construction and design in Ireland, and they've been very successful for 5 years, 10 years, very much pushing the envelope.
Fantastic. Well, I can tell you're getting busy there. You're a wanted man. So, does anybody else have any final questions for Michael before we finish up?
Sent most people to sleep.
Well, I was riveted.
We're always here. If anybody would like to, through Futurecast, contact me or directly contact me for any further information, please reach out. That's why we're here, why I'm here. I know you've got the following session with James, and he'll shine a torch into the pretty areas of technology, which is probably more interesting than listening to the ramblings of a madman. So I thank you for your time and your interest to date, and hope everybody keeps safe out there.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.